So while this is going on, England also becomes Protestant, excuse me. Henry VIII wants a son. Okay, he only has daughters. He needs a male heir to rule England. So he wants a divorce because he says that his wife can't provide him with a male heir. The Pope refuses to annul this, his first marriage. And so what Henry VIII does is he pretty much tells the church that they can go to hell, and he has a parliament pass laws that ends the Pope's power in England. Henry gets divorced, he remarries, and what happens is he becomes the official head of the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. Thomas More, you might have remembered him from the Renaissance, he wrote Utopia, and he refused to go against the Catholic Church and is eventually beheaded by Henry VIII. So the consequences of Henry's change is that Henry has 6 wives and 3 children. There's a lot of religious turmoil that follows Henry's death in 1547. There's Protestantism under King Edward and Catholicism under Queen Mary, and it kind of goes back and forth until Queen Elizabeth comes and stabilizes the situation. As Henry's second daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, forms the Anglican Church, so that's what it's called still to this day. And the Anglican Church is acceptable to moderate Catholics and Protestants. The Anglican Church is pretty similar, honestly, to the Catholic Church. The only difference is that the King or Queen of England is the head of the church as opposed to the Pope. In Switzerland, a new form of religion is developed at around the same time as well. There was a Swiss priest, Zwingli, who called for church reforms in 1520, and there's a war that breaks out between Catholics and Protestants, and Zwingli is actually killed in 1531. Then John Calvin, who's from France, actually comes to Switzerland, and he formalizes some of these Protestant ideals. John Calvin writes the Institutes of Christian Religion in 1536, and what he says, his beliefs are that we are sinful by nature and cannot earn salvation. And pretty much before you're born, God chooses if you're going to be saved or not. So they believe in predestination. And Calvinism is a religion based on Calvin's teachings. Now, Calvin leads the Reformation in Switzerland. Calvin says ideal government is theocracy. Now, this is ruled by religious leaders. There's still some theocracy today. Geneva becomes a strict Protestant theocracy led by Calvin. All right, and the Calvinists really believe in not having any fun. There's no gambling allowed. There's no debauchery, no drinking. So this becomes a very strict society. Calvinism spreads across Europe. John Knox brings Calvinism to Scotland, their followers are called the Presbyterians. In England, they're called the Puritans. In France, they're called the Huguenots. And eventually, a lot of these people are actually persecuted in their different countries. And we'll look at this later on, but Catholics massacre the Huguenots in Paris in 1572. Some other Protestant reformers are the Anabaptists. They believe that there's a separation of church and state, and they oppose wars. They believe that you should choose to be baptized as opposed to being baptized when you're a child. And they're the forerunners of the Mennonites and the Amish who live in Pennsylvania in the United States. And then the women's roles in the Reformation. Marguerite of Navarre protected Calvin in France. Katrina Zell also protects reformers. And Katharina von Bora, Luther's wife, promotes equality in marriage. The Catholic Church responded to this in a big way. And they had something called either the Catholic Reformation or the Counter-Reformation. And this was an idea where the Catholic Church seeks to reform itself from within. Ignatius de Loyola was the leading Catholic reformer. His spiritual exercises calls for meditation, prayer, and study. The Pope creates a Society of Jesus in a religious order called the Jesuits, and they go around the world and they try to educate people in the teachings of God. You may have heard of Loyola College in the United States, obviously named after this man. So the Catholic Church tries to reform itself. Pope Paul III and Pope Paul IV lead these reforms. They call the Council of Trent, which pretty much reaffirmed the Church's beliefs that the Church's interpretation of the Bible is final. Christians need faith and good works for salvation. The Bible and Church traditions are equally important. Indulgences are a valid expression of faith. So this is pretty much saying that Luther is going against the Catholic Church completely and no one should believe him. They use the Inquisition to seek out heresy, and then Paul IV issues an index of forbidden books, especially probably Luther's books, that are burned. So the legacy of the Reformation, there's religious and social effects. The Catholic Church is unified. Protestants' domination grow. Catholics and Protestants create schools throughout Europe. and the status of women doesn't really improve. It stays the same. Politically, the Catholic Church's power is actually lessened, obviously, because a lot of people have switched sides now and are either Lutheran or Calvinist. The Reformation's questionings of beliefs brings intellectual ferment, so people are really starting to learn and challenge ideas. And this will lead later on in the 18th century to the Enlightenment.